So thank you for coming on the podcast, first of all, and thanks to Sharon for introducing us.
Yes, she's awesome.
She is awesome. So you are a registered nurse. Jill is a registered nurse and real estate investor. Founded Colorado Solutions in 2009 during the depths of the financial crisis, focusing primarily on wholesaling and rehabs. She also succeeded in building a small rental portfolio in the Colorado Springs market. 2012 brought Jill, her husband, and 3 daughters to Littleton, Colorado, so her husband could earn his math degree at UC Denver. In 2016, Jill earned her associate broker license, currently held with Equity Colorado, and focused primarily on selling the rental portfolio in Colorado Springs to transition to the Denver market. And you officially fired your boss in September of 2018 and now in the real estate business full time.
Yep.
Looks like you're flipping homes in Southwest Denver metro area while learning and implementing systems that will help scale the business to provide a low stress lifestyle with an abundance of free time, which is my favorite thing. So awesome stuff.
Yeah.
You've been busy.
Yes. Well, thank you so
So
much for having me on here. I'm really excited.
thank you. I am too. So what brought you into real estate from being a nurse? I'm curious.
Gosh, I don't even know. It's been so long ago now. I think I first kind of got really interested in it right after nursing school. So it was really early in the 2000s, probably 2003 or so. And I guess I liked the freedom that it can provide, whereas nursing, you're kind of always stuck to a job, a schedule, that kind of stuff. So just the more I learned, the more I really, really liked it. So.
Nice. So no previous real estate experience or anything like that. Did you go to a meeting or something that kind of got you into it, or read a book or?
No, well, I did buy some books early on, but I think I always had that interest in real estate, more so toward rental property early on. But I just was always pretty much drawn to it, I think. I don't think I could pinpoint any one thing that got me interested, just as long as I can remember. It's been an interest of mine.
Nice. So no late night guru got to you or anything?
Well, no, I did have a friend growing up. His mom had rental property. That's probably where a lot of the initial interest came from. But yeah, we all have the Carlton Sheets, story of hearing his stuff on TV, but there really wasn't just any one mentor in the beginning. No, I kind of sought them out later.
Mm-hmm. So when you got started, did you have a mentor?
When I officially got started, I had a lot of false starts. So when I officially got started, I hired a mentor shortly after that. But initially, I learned a lot from Steve Cook's website.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a lot of time on there after nursing school, after I passed my nursing exam. That kind of got my foot in the door. But once we lived in Indiana at the time. Once we moved to Colorado, I did find an investor group after I did my first wholesale deal. But prior to that, it was just basically learning on my own and just went out and did it with the wholesale.
Sometimes that's the best teacher, right? Is just
got to do it. Yeah.
Which is scary, right? Especially.
It was very, very scary. Yes. And that's why I had a lot of false starts, I think, too, because not having a mentor, definitely having both of those experiences, you can tell now that it's so much easier when you have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of or ask questions to, or God forbid something would have gone bad in that wholesale deal. I wouldn't have had anybody at all, to ask questions to. But I took the money from that deal and got in touch with a mentor locally. So that's how I was able to pay for it.
That was smart. Actually,
Yeah.
That's really smart. I tell people that all the time. They're like, well, what do I do? How do I get started? And one of the first things I usually like to tell people is, find a mentor, find a coach or a mentor, somebody that you trust, that you connect with.
Mm-hmm.
and then, really do the work. Don't expect them to do everything for you. You've got to self-educate, and they're there to, a good mentor or coach is going to guide you. They're not going to just,
For you.
yeah.
Yeah, you have to go get your feet wet and get out there and implement the things that you're reading and the things that they're helping you with. But I agree, the mentor is probably the biggest key to success, in my opinion. I mean, I couldn't have done it without having one. I mean, one wholesale deal, I looked for a long time. I kind of got lucky, but there was no way I would have gone much further than that without, the resources and stuff that a mentor provides.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like, why reinvent the wheel for some of that stuff? You're really, what you're doing is paying for the benefit of their experience.
Yep. And it gives you confidence too, because without having someone to bounce ideas off of, it is very intimidating just going out there and being like, okay, I'm really going to trust that I'm going to find a buyer or the money on my own just because I have a good deal. I mean, that's generally true, but it's a hard thing to just trust and go with that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I can't say enough about how important having a mentor is, just to give you that, like, you're right. It is like a safety net almost.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to let you totally hose things up. So there's some kind of like relief in that,
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So how did I think of a good way to ask this question? Like, getting started, how did you decide? So I know you buy a lot of properties off the MLS. Was that always a thing, or was that just kind of something you stumbled onto, or was that a purposeful?
Well, when I got started, I guess I would say it's purposeful to a certain degree. In '08, '07, '08, '09, there was so much inventory on the MLS. There were 10 bank-owned homes to every one owner-occupied home for sale. So it was just sort of a no-brainer, at least to get going. The mentor that I was with, Michael Jake down there, he taught a lot of marketing and things like that, but that was just never really where I ended up. I mean, I always ended up finding deals on the MLS. So it really was never, and not necessarily a necessity to have that large marketing budget and spending all that time when you had so much inventory. Now that's kind of swapped now we have a big inventory shortage here, and we have had for several years. But I think at that time, that was just the easiest path, the path of least resistance, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember like the time leading up to 2008, buying more things off the MLS and having relationships with like REO realtors. That was a big thing back then.
Yeah.
You probably remember that too, right?
Yeah. And if you mess something up with like the big the person doing the short sales or the REOs, like that's it. Like,
yep.
No more.
Yeah, you do not want to make them mad.
Nope, you don't. You don't want to be on their list.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I remember that well, because I remember actually, I said we didn't buy a bunch of stuff off MLS, but that was the biggest time that we did, was during that time period. Buying bank-owned properties with those REO realtors was a big source of deals for us too, for a not too long, but a couple of years at least.
Right. And then it kind of transitioned to massive shortage of housing once the foreclosures dried up and short sales dried up. But yeah, it was different. Just the path of least resistance, I think, at least initially.
Yeah. So do you have like one agent that you work with, or?
So back then, I did have an agent in the Springs. I've since gotten my license now, so I just do everything myself at this point. But back then we had one agent that we worked with for a little while, and then transitioned to getting, my own license.
So I want to ask you about that because a lot of people that I talk to, they are trying to get started, and they're reaching out to agents and stuff like that. Like, I'm trying to find deals. What advice can you give people who are in that position? Like, how would you handle um, who you're reaching out to as far as an agent, and how to build those relationships?
So if you're not interested in getting your own license, I would think the best option is, if you have a spouse that wants to get their license, or a friend, or just finding a new agent that really, really, really is hungry and wants to make a name for themselves in the business. Most realtors are not that interested in working with investors as buyers, especially newer ones, in my experience, just because of the amount of time that goes into getting one deal. And usually that deal is, well below market value. So they're submitting all these low offers. Potentially, when you submit a low offer to another agent, sometimes it's not very well received. And so, more established agents don't necessarily want to do that to themselves by, just lowballing everybody in town. So in my opinion, I think the best route, the best approach is to find a new agent that really wants the business. If you're not willing to get your license yourself. I mean, to be honest, I personally wouldn't represent a new investor as an agent, just because of all the reasons I said. Like, I don't want to become known in that way as an agent. You want to be well respected, amongst your peers. So just sort of like what we were talking about with the, the REO agents back in 08 and 09, it's like, you don't want to burn a bridge, with anyone. So definitely, if you don't get your license yourself, the best route is to find somebody new that's just willing to take that on, to, get their foot in the door. But I just wouldn't expect it to last very long. I kind of feel like you might have a high turnover rate with having to find new agents to work with, personally, as a new investor. More established investors, I think, would have more luck, because you're not offering necessarily on 20 properties to get one, like a newer investor might be. So.
Did you ever get like a lot of pocket listings?
On occasion, I do now. We have just recently implemented some rules that basically eliminate your ability to get a pocket listing. So our coming soon requirements require you to not show the property until it is active in the MLS. So I have in the past. I think that route might actually be gone now for the most part, without it being an active listing. I think, but I have some good working relationships with other agents with my broker that, if you're consistent with what you do and say, and you're always going to close on a property, I think you could get a lot of deals in that way by just establishing good relationships with other agents.
That's good to remember, because I think, well, this is such a relationship-based business, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about who you know, and your network is your net worth, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
It's so true. I feel,
Sharon says it's, and also who knows you.
yep.
If you're a nobody, or if nobody knows you, it's hard to be credible to a certain degree. So that makes it even more important, I think, to do what you say you're going to do and follow through and things like that.
For sure. I like that. So let's talk a little bit about the MLS process, how you're picking these things up off MLS. Because I'll be honest, that's something I struggle with. I'm so used to marketing directly to sellers, and I know people that buy stuff off the MLS, but I'm always like, how did you do that? Because I feel like I make offers, and even though I've been doing it for a long time, I feel like there's credibility there, and I put all this stuff together, and we even wrote a whole process on how to do that. I don't know if we didn't let the process go out long enough or what, but can you kind of walk through like what you're looking for when you're looking for these properties on the MLS and kind of how you're presenting the offers?
Sure. Yeah. So normally, so I know a lot of investors will focus on a wide area. So Denver Metro is a big area, but typically I focus just in a really small, I mean, basically I just focus in Littleton. And even that, it's even a smaller area. So I know the area really, really well. So, I mean, in my opinion, it starts there, but instead of focusing mostly on the deals that are, they hit the market and they're a fantastic price, like, oh my gosh, I've got to go see that house. I don't even waste my time there. I focus on like 30, 60, 90 day plus on the market. And I look for ones that are generally overpriced right now for their area, that they listed too high initially and they've sat, or they didn't cut their price fast enough. And those are the ones I typically will target, generally speaking. If that combined with obvious motivation, for example, a house that needs work, although I have picked up one that really was a really decent house until you opened up the walls, but mostly you want to combine that with another form of motivation. So did it recently just come back on the market and it had already been on the market for 90 days? I will, in my opinion, those that have sat forever, that went under contract and then came back on the market, are some of the most motivated sellers, especially if their house needs work.
Oh yeah.
So I don't focus, I guess, on price, which is what gets a lot of people in the door, but that's sort of on purpose. That's what the realtor is trying to do. They're trying to drive up, multiple offers, drive up the bid. I don't want to involve myself in that. I look for the properties that are priced too high, and then I offer them what makes it a good deal for me. So you have to be somewhat strategic there, because you don't want to burn bridges with some of these agents. But at the same time, if the property needs work, the seller's already kind of like, okay, well, we need to be thinking about a price cut or, something to get this thing sold. So generally that's where I find most of my success is, a long time on the market combined with another motivating factor.
I like that. And that's something that we do too when I market to motivated sellers, like stacking those criteria, like what's the motivation here? It's kind of the same thing. If you just flip it the other way, it's like, well, you could pull a high equity list and shotgun out to a bunch of people, but that doesn't, just because somebody has high equity doesn't mean they want to sell.
Right. Or at a reduced price even,
Yeah. So it's like stacking the motivations really is kind of the key. I'm curious about that though. If the house is overpriced already and then you're going in with the lowball offer, like how how does that look? Do you find a lot of I know sometimes like certain agents, like this isn't anything bad against agents, but they don't understand like the investor standpoint of real estate. They just understand like this is a transaction, like not for investment purposes, it's a different mindset. But do you often run into problems with realtors that don't take the time to explain to the seller, like this is actually not a bad offer because, your house needs this, this, and this? Like, is it more the agent giving the inflated price, or is it the seller thinking that they need, that they want to get this much and they just won't listen to the realtor? Do you find one more than the other?
Well, I would say it's probably 50-50. And I can tell pretty well if I've made an offer, if the house is worth my time to keep tracking, because I'll make an offer and they go on my list and I follow them until they're closed. So I know if I've seen a house and it went under contract and comes back on the market, I'm submitting another offer on it. Even if they said no the first time. And that's actually, I just got a house under contract that way. Just right now, where we close on the 21st. But typically I find that sometimes the agents won't even present the offer, even though legally they're supposed to, or at least I suspect that they, because it does sort of make them look bad to a certain degree. So I can see why they might get a little bit upset. But the response that you get from that agent is going to tell you whether that seller is never going to consider the offer, maybe they're, somewhat in that level of motivation, or whether they're super motivated. So I've had them come back and say, for example, well, do you think you can come up just, maybe a little bit higher? Is this the best you can do? And I'm thinking, wow, I just offered, $75,000 less than your asking price. I think maybe they're getting a little bit motivated. They're just trying to get some more out of me,
Yeah.
But I've also had them come back and be like, there's absolutely no way, never, we're never doing that. Or I've had them, actually write up a counter offer. So I think, in that realm, you can kind of gauge their receptiveness, I guess, where they're kind of at in their level of motivation. If they come back and say absolutely never, I don't even mess with following up with them. But if they come back and they say, well, can you come up a little bit? Sometimes I'll negotiate my commission. Sometimes I'll waive the commission to get them a higher net price.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like, absolutely not. This is, the best I can do. Come talk to me in 2 more weeks if you're still on the market or something like that. But yeah, it really depends. And it's hard to gauge from the MLS listing. I think you just have to make the offers to see, where they're at, where they're going to come back at, or if they're even going to respond. Sometimes they just don't respond. So I think those are the cases where they probably aren't presenting the offer, in my opinion, but I don't know that for sure.
I feel like that too sometimes. I've often wondered that, like, did you even show them the offer? I'd be just curious to know, because sometimes, it's like, well, we submitted this offer and like they didn't even counter. They didn't even acknowledge that they received the offer. So it makes me wonder, did they actually get it? What kind of job did the realtor do on explaining why this offer is the way it is? Because you're delusional about your house. We get these ones, I don't know about you, but we get these ones all the time where the people are like, the house doesn't need that much work. We updated it not that long ago. And then you go in, it's like the house is straight from the 80s. It's like, it's never been touched. It's like, it doesn't need anything. It's like,
right.
It does.
Depends on what you want it for, I guess, but
yeah, it's like, it's super clean, but it's super clean with all 80s, like, you know, funky wallpaper and gross carpet and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're living in a delusional world if you think that that's people want to buy that the way that is, at full retail price, like as if it's fully like rehabbed or something.
Well, and those are exactly the people that I'm targeting. I mean, not necessarily the ones that are delusional, but they're delusional at first. Mm-hmm. And they think that, they should get, rehabbed value for their house and not have to come down in price to compensate for the work that needs done. So they list really high and then they sit and sit and sit and they won't cut their price. So they sit even more. Those are exactly the people that I'm looking for, generally speaking.
I like that. So then how does that go? Do you just keep at them? Like,
sometimes I will submit the offer. If I get a good response from the agent, I will, if they say no initially, I'll gauge, a time frame to follow up. And I'll go ahead and resubmit my offer. Sometimes I resubmit it every week. Sometimes I'll wait for something to happen, like when I'm suspecting they might have a price cut coming. Because, a lot of agents work in sort of a system. Not everybody works in the same system, but generally speaking, 30 to 45 days, you're going to see a price cut. Mm-hmm. So if we're approaching that time frame, they've already been thinking about it. So I might go ahead and resubmit at that point before the price cut happens, so that I'm the only offer in there. I don't like to compete with my offers. I don't like to get involved in that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, like in the case, the house we just got, I submitted my offer twice. They said no both times. Then it went under contract, came back on the market because the house just needed too much work for the original buyer. And when I went back to him, I was like, is your sellers willing to consider this price? We're still interested in purchasing it. And at that point, he was like, yes, I think they're willing to go at this price. And so I wrote it up. I don't think it had been active on the MLS for 30 minutes before we had the offer in front of them. So it's a lot of it is just tracking it and just feeling it out. You just got to make that initial offer and see where they stand initially to see if it's even worth following up. But yeah, it's offer dependent, I guess, what my next move is with it, the response from the agent.
Are you typically, so when you're submitting that offer multiple times, like with that property, is it the same offer or are you adjusting the numbers at all?
Sometimes I will adjust the numbers because I generally do always come in low to people want to negotiate. They don't necessarily want that final price to be the first offer to be the final price. So I do generally go in lower first. So sometimes I will come up over time a little bit each time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just like, this is my bottom line. So this is it. I actually walked away from a deal that we were $5,000 apart, but that $5,000, that was my bottom line. Like,
yeah.
No. So
did you keep it in follow up?
Doing it. Do what?
Did you keep it in follow up?
I ended up getting this other house under contract, so I didn't need to, but they are pending now. They have an offer accepted now. So yeah, it was that 400 point. For some reason, that seller just mentally would not go below 400. And I mean, it needed a lot of work. So I was kind of pushing it at 395 anyway. So yeah, sometimes you can be flexible, sometimes you can't, but I'll never be sad about the ones I lose, especially if it meant offering too much money, because that's the quickest way to be done in this business.
Yeah. I was just talking to somebody about that, not even probably 20 minutes ago. We were talking about that very thing about, I think there's a temptation a lot of times, especially for people just getting started, to fudge the numbers because they want a deal so bad. And even experienced investors, I've caught myself doing it a couple of times, just like, well, maybe we can offer just a little bit more, and I'm always uncomfortable with that. And I don't make it a habit unless it's a property that I know is going to move fast. Then I might, but honestly, I agree with you. I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble because they want to push the numbers and they're not willing to walk away. They think, well, if I just a little bit more and then a little bit more and a little bit more, and then before you know it, you've built out you have no cushion anymore at that point in the deal.
Right. And depending on the time of year, that could be detrimental. I mean, for example, going into, Thanksgiving, Christmas time, you could end up holding the house an extra 2 months just because of the holidays, or at this point, COVID. I mean, who knows? Maybe we get another shutdown or something. So yeah, I think I definitely think the MLS helps you not have that emotional attachment because it's just all email and text. So it's easy to say, no, if this is the bottom line, there's always another house, always another house.
True. So I'm curious, with all these offers and everything that you're making, how are you tracking all that? Do you have a system that you use?
Not really. I actually just had somebody asking me about this the other day. I don't know that this system is available to people that are not licensed, but you can set it up similar through Zillow or Redfin or, something like that. But I have just an app on my phone that's HomeSnap. I don't know if I'm pretty sure it's in a lot of markets. I don't know if it's nationwide, but you just save it as a favorite. With me being licensed, all of my ones that are saved as favorites, it just alerts me when something happens to it. So I get a little ding on my phone if there's a price cut, or if it goes under contract, or if it comes back on the market. So that's really it. I just save it to my favorites and check on them, if I'm actively buying, which I typically just do one at a time. So I'm not, filtering 20 offers all the time. Just when I am actively buying.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it a little bit easier in that realm. But I usually will just make 1 or 2 offers a day until I get something. So I'll pick 1 or 2 houses, go look at them, write up an offer, track them, and until I get a contract, and then I will just, wait until I'm ready to actively look again. Other than I do keep up, I do frequently go and just look at houses just to look at them, just to stay on top of the market.
Okay. So then with, does that system work too, or apply like for follow-ups? Because I know that's a big thing in our business, is just being able to follow up with leads. So
Mhm.
does it help you track that in any way?
It doesn't help me track follow-up, but I don't have so many offers and so many things out there at one time, personally, just because I'm not actively buying all the time. So I remember, I'll remember, hey, I was going to follow up on that house. So, on Fridays, I'll send out my emails or whatever to follow up with the agents. If I'm following up, sometimes I'm just watching and waiting,
Mm-hmm.
see what happens with them. I would say if somebody's doing something more in depth than what I'm doing, like looking for something bigger scale than that, you would definitely want to use like some type of a system to keep it organized, to remind you who you need to follow up with. But I probably am only following up with maybe 5, on 5 different properties at any one time. Even if I'm tracking 20, I'm not necessarily, because half of those, the agents come back and they're like, never, no. And so I'm not going to waste my time. So yeah, it for me, there's not such a big list that I need a separate program, but I could see how it would be necessary for somebody that wants to buy a house a month or something like that.
Yeah. How many houses are you buying a year, or what's your criteria for that?
So I like to have my current house under contract and through the inspection period before I'm looking for my next one. It usually only takes me about 2 weeks or so, maybe 3, to get something under contract again. So we're typically looking at buying 4 to 5 houses in a year's time frame. So I know there's plenty of people out there that do hundreds and hundreds of houses, at a time. That's just not the level that we even want to be at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy with 4 to 5 a year, just because of the level of stress that that many flips can do. So yeah, it's for myself. There's not a lot of tracking, and follow up when I'm in the active buying period. There's a little bit. Outside of that, there's not.
That's interesting. I like what you said about keeping, like knowing that you don't want to do that many deals.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people think, well, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to just, do like a crap ton of deals for the year and stuff, and then get frustrated. But I could see what you're doing as a great entry point for somebody that's just getting started.
Definitely.
Is it like creating that system, and then actually, going out and just knowing that, like, I don't have to do a ton of these, but I know it's going to take me this long to do. And that just comes with time and experience. Like, I'm sure your market really well, and like you said, it takes me 2 to 3 weeks to get another one. And that's just your cycle, because you've been doing it for a long time. You can identify that. But for people getting started, knowing that it's okay, that process is just going to take some time, and just, one and then another and then another, instead of trying to stack a bunch of them all at one time.
Yeah, especially somebody new. Everybody's risk level is different. Personally, I wouldn't go, all out and try to do 10 at a time. Like, especially that first year, right? You just get a feel for it. You're probably not going to make a lot of money on the first one anyway. You don't want to have, unless you have all kinds of money in reserves, for me, that sounds a little dangerous to go out and and maybe buy 10 at one time, or get one started and go for the next one. Definitely there was a point in time where I would have been on board with that though, but just my kids are grown now, and it's just not really where my focus is at. I'd rather travel and do other things. So
I feel that. That's kind of where I'm at also. It's just like, I don't need to do a ton of deals anymore. Why am I killing myself?
exactly, right. I mean,
I
time.
want to stop working at 3 o'clock and go swimming with my kids in the pool when school's out. It's just,
Yeah, enjoy it. Yeah, exactly.
that's what all this is about, right? I mean, that's why we do this, so that we can enjoy our lives and have that lifestyle and not have all that stress.
Exactly. I agree. And early on, I think it takes people kind of going through a little bit of a cycle. Some people never come out of that. They just stay on that wheel of doing more and more. But I definitely over time have decided that that's not worth it to me. I'd rather do 5 solid deals than 100, that might be slim. For me, it's not worth the stress level.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. I love when I hear other people say that. It's like, oh, I'm not alone, because people here, we're so exposed with all the social media and everything, especially, and it's like women thinking that they've got to go out and like kill it and be a boss lady and do 100 deals a year and stuff. And it's like, nobody can sustain that. Like, I think there is a time for, hustling and stuff when you need to, but like that shouldn't be your whole everything. You need to be able to step back and like remember why you built that business to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah. Why trade, your 60-hour-a-week job for another 60-hour-a-week job? In my world, that doesn't make any sense, but
Mine either.
I agree. You hustle when you need to, but you
Right.
don't always need to.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean become complacent either,
Right.
after a time, but which is another easy trap to fall into. It's like either work too hard or maybe not enough sometimes. I found myself getting that way sometimes where I'm just like, oh, it's fine, and then it's like, oh crap, there's nothing in the pipeline, better get busy, and then you work really hard.
That's the important thing. Always keep that pipeline going, and you'll be fine. But that's why I like the MLS, because the pipeline's always full there. You have to find it,
That's very true. And I should think more about that, because so I only market to sellers, directly to sellers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't keep that marketing going, then you run into problems. But with the MLS, it's all there. You're not chasing anybody. The deals are just there. You just need to know how to sift through those, figure out what fits your criteria and your exit strategy. And
Exactly.
so I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. I was wondering, with those listings, are you pursuing expired listings at all, or are you just keeping to active?
So for off-market marketing, we do have some of that going, and that is a target for expired listings. But really, though, I wouldn't focus on right away expireds, like they just expired yesterday or even a month ago, because they get bombarded, at least in my market. They're getting calls and door knocks, and from probably investors too, but just from other agents trying to get the listing. So, I mean, typically if I'm pulling a mailing to that list, it's like 6 months expired listings, but more for like a creative type purchase, not necessarily like, although sometimes it could work out to be a fix and flip, but I would think if they've waited 6 months and haven't put it back on the market, that they just might be open to like an owner financing deal or subject to, or something more creative than just a quick sale on the market. So that's typically where I would target an expired, just the 6 month after they expired 6 months.
Okay, I'm going to think about that, because so I've done both ways. And I know a lot of people have tried different things too. So there's the group of people that go after the stuff right when it hits the MLS, and we tried that. and that's just like, you got to be Johnny on the spot with those, you know,
And
and
you're competing. There, you have a lot of
yeah,
competition when they first hit.
yeah. And I'm not trying to hang out all day on MLS. So that's,
Right.
you know, that's the other side to that, you know, and then the other one is kind of like what you're doing, just, you know, going for different time periods and then stacking some of that criteria, like area and stuff like that. But I
Mhm.
don't think, maybe I'm going too far out. I'm going to have to think about that. Because you said you do 60 to 90 days on market.
So I'll start looking at them at 30 days on the
Okay.
market. I won't necessarily make an offer, but sometimes I will. The one I just got had been on the market for, I think, 35 days or something like that. It really just depends on if I'm struggling finding something at the 60 or 90 day point. I will start looking and seeing, well, who can I start, following and anyway, and watch for price cuts and things. But sometimes I will probably, gosh, I would say at least half the time I am making offers on houses that have at 30 days. I don't know your market, but mine, if your house has been on the market for a week, even though that's getting somewhat more normal, right now sellers they start to get a little concerned, like, oh my gosh, why, it's been a week, why hasn't my house sold yet? Why don't I have 10 offers in my hands right now? Because that is somewhat the expectation. So at 30 days, I think there is some level of motivation for people, especially if it's combined with a price cut or a back on the market situation, or, a junker that really needs a lot of work.
Yeah. Those back on the markets can be good opportunities too, because at that point, it's like you had a seller, they got an inspection. They probably didn't like what was on the inspection. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the buyer walked because, you know, the seller wouldn't negotiate repairs, or it was just too overwhelming for them and they didn't even try. You know, they just said, no, forget this. You know, I'm going to move on. Do you
Mm-hmm.
find that a lot? Do you use that as a negotiating point
I
for the back on markets?
I do, and I track. So initially, let's say I'm, my current flip is under contract, and I'm starting to look for my next one. That's initially where I start looking. So I'll look for anything that check the history and see, have they had a price cut? Have they gone under contract multiple times and come back on the market? And those sort of just automatically go on my list. Or I might, run out there and take a look at it and not necessarily make an offer today, but just wait and see. Because back on the markets, in my opinion, for a house that needs work, is one of the biggest motivating factors for those sellers to change their pricing opinion, I guess. It brings them down to reality better than almost anything else out there, even better than feedback, which sometimes can be pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Agents leaving really bad feedback.
Yeah.
But I'll watch for that. That's probably one of my number one things that will happen, that I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go make an offer on that one now when it comes back on the market. And you have to be quick because the market is on fire. So if I've already seen it, I don't need to see it again. I'll just type up an offer and send it, or follow back up with the agent anyway and say, hey, you remember that offer I sent, 2 weeks ago? What do you think your sellers would think of it now? I'm not asking for any inspection items. I'm an investor. So the thing I really even inspect is the sewer, the roof, or sometimes the foundation. We have a lot of foundation stuff, in my area, but yeah, so that combo can be a good win, especially if they've come back on the market because the initial buyer asked for, a new house basically, or, they want everything, or they walk because the condition's too bad or something like that. That the fact that you're an investor and it's cash and you're not going to nitpick them down on the price, those are really good selling points at that point.
Yeah. I was going to ask you something else. I was thinking about as you were talking about that. And it went completely out of my head. So that's going to have to be edited as my brain churns. Like, what was I going to ask? Yeah. So I guess, oh, well, I was going to ask you this. So you're closing on all these deals then and rehabbing everything, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how are you funding those deals? Are you using private money or hard money or?
Currently, we use a hard money lender. They're priced more, I guess, in between a real true hard money lender and private money. But it's just hard money that they go in, do a quick ARV appraisal and can close, I guess, in like 5 days. I haven't used them to close that quickly, but they can close that quickly.
How long do your typical transactions, how long do they take?
For the flip?
Mm-hmm. Well, for the purchasing, like when you make the offers, I guess from offer acceptance to closing, you close pretty fast.
If that's what they want, the seller, if the house is occupied, they typically want to drag it out a little bit longer than that. So this one we've had under contract. By the time we close and get actual occupancy of the house, it will have been 6 weeks. Sometimes though, like if we bought a vacant house, the last one I bought, we tried to close in a week, but then we ran into a lot of sewer negotiations. that was interesting. So that one ended up taking 2 weeks. So really we just leave that in the court for the seller to decide. Because sometimes a longer closing for them is beneficial, even though you can offer to close quickly. Sometimes they want to take longer.
That's true. We do that too quite a bit. We do lease backs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
People, buy it and then lease it back to withhold part of the proceeds from the sale and just have them lease it out for 2 weeks or whatever until they are able to get out.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing with this one. It's just, I think it's 6 days that they're staying after closing, but it does help them because then they can get the money deposited and they can, figure out what to do, down payment or whatever next, on their next place. So
yeah,
a lot of deals fall through around here anymore. I mean, I would say probably 25% of them, you see them come back on the market. So it's hard for sellers to be able to plan not knowing for sure. I wouldn't want to have my truck loaded up and only to say, oh, sorry, I guess we're not closing, today.
oh, we've had that happen before. It's not good.
Yeah, right. No, I think the leasebacks, being able to be flexible like that is definitely good, makes your offer stronger, even though it's not great in price.
Yeah, for sure.
Make up for that somewhat anyway.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's a convenience that they're more needing than the cash. It's like we just, especially people that are building new homes. We've got one like that right now where we put it under contract, but we're not going to close it till like December because they're doing new construction. So we can't, so we told them, well, we'll close it sooner. We'll do a lease back when you're like a month out from the house being done. So we have a long timeline on that one, but it's going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember what I was going to ask you a minute ago, though. With these MLS properties, are you buying these sight unseen, like just straight off the MLS, or are you going and actually putting eyes on them?
I walk every property. And the biggest reason why, in the springs early on, I would make offers where I would get into the house after I was fairly certain that, we were going to be able to work something out. But up here, we have a lot of neighborhoods that have the type of soil that just, it's really not good. I mean, some houses are literally almost sideways and you won't know it by looking at the pictures. You have to actually go into the houses. There's a lot of foundation problems here. So I do walk every single property, especially with my own reputation on the line and building that relationship with other agents. I mean, I'm not going to back out of something unless it's just something crazy, like, maybe the house burned down before closing, then I might back out. But I want to know for sure that this is a house that I want to buy, because I don't want to walk through later and then be like, oh, guys, you know what? I'm sorry. This just isn't, it's not going to work for me. The foundation, is terrible. I don't want to do that. So I do walk every single property, but that, I know it's kind of time consuming, but that helps me know my market well enough to see a house that comes on the market in my area. And I can say right away, yeah, this is what my offer is probably going to be based on square footage and location and, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be time consuming, going and seeing them all, but I walk every single property.
I do too. And I think it's worth it. And I do it for the exact same reasons that you do. When you put your eyes on it yourself, it's a different story. Cause then I feel like, at least in my mind, I feel like I'm making the best decision because I actually looked at it. Because we tried making sight unseen offers, and what we were doing was, looking at the pictures, which you obviously can't ever tell about the foundation. We have foundation issues here too, so I'm very familiar with that. But you can't tell in the pictures. You might see some cracks in a picture sometimes if it's like a really gross one and the realtor's not a good photographer. You might see some stuff, but there is something to actually going and putting your eyes on that property. I think that,
yeah.
And it is because of reputation and stuff. If you start making a bunch of offers and then you're constantly backing out, then you lose your credibility. And I'm with you. Like, you take all that time to build that relationship. Why are you going to destroy it by, make an offer, rescinding offer, make an offer, rescinding offer, like that constant, then people don't believe you're going to do what you say you're going to do.
Exactly. And we have a lot of wholesalers in town here that do unfortunately get that reputation for themselves. And I'll see it through like the agent. We have, through Facebook groups and things like that, just agent only groups where, you can just read through and just like all these things about wholesalers or all these things about investors that, it's because these people have had these experiences. And it's like, no, I think I'll go the extra mile and not be that. I don't want to be that person on the message boards that everybody's talking about, if they don't find a buyer in 5 days, they're going to back out, in the inspection period. There's a lot of talk of that with wholesalers and things like that. And gosh, what a way to just completely destroy your reputation just because you back out of 2 or 3 wholesale deals that you just wanted to make a quick buck on. I don't know. I think people really should go that extra mile to maintain their reputation, because even if the investors don't see it, like, you don't want to get that bad reputation with the agents behind the scenes either, because they're the ones, if you're working the MLS, they're the ones that you're dealing with when you're submitting your offers. You don't want them to have a bad opinion of investors in general, but it's of yourself specifically. It's really important, I think, working the MLS to maintain it, especially to maintain your reputation and do what you say you're going to do. You might come across an inspection item that you just totally missed. Nobody can help that, but it gets pretty obvious when you can track some individuals, wholesalers, properties that that like in 10 days, it's probably coming back on the market. Like, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Quickest way to ruin your business.
Yeah. You definitely lose some credibility there. And that, I think more than anything, especially right now, that's just super important.
Mm-hmm.
There's especially, it sounds like your market's similar to mine. We're so flooded with people, investors right now, and wholesalers, and I wholesale too. I put myself in that boat too, but I also rehab and I also buy rentals and things like that. So I'm not primarily just a wholesaler, but you do get that reputation and you hear things, and then, it's like people's deals are falling apart all the time, and people don't want to work with people like that. There's no.
Yeah, I don't want to associate myself with investors like that are only locking things up and then putting them back on the market if they can't sell them. If
Right.
you should
think about the seller. That's what I always go back to. It's like these poor people, like, it's one thing to be transparent with them in the beginning. So when we wholesale, if we know we're going to wholesale something, we will tell that seller ahead of time, this is what we're doing. We work with a network of other investors in town. And so if we don't close on it, we've got other people that will. And we always know when it's something we can move or not move, so we never go in with the intention of not closing on it. We pretty much close everything that we put under contract. The only time we don't is if they walk for some reason.
Right.
But we try to make sure the numbers are solid so that we're not going back and renegotiating price. Every once in a while that happens. And it's usually just because like something came up on title, that they didn't tell us, like, oh, well, here's a tax lien that you never mentioned, something like that. Or some weird like HELOC thing that wasn't resolved, or stuff like that where we might have to go back, but that's never the way we go into it. We're always very transparent about it, and I think a lot of people aren't, and so it does do damage. And I just think about these sellers, like here they are in their mind, when they sign that contract, in their mind they think it's done, right? And then it's like you're pulling the rug out from under them. They think it's a done deal, and then it's like, oh, can't do it, just can't close it, take it away, and that's got to be really frustrating for a seller to go through that.
I do. Having gone through that myself, not in a wholesale situation, but just having flips on the market, and you're just, you're really happy, you're so excited, you're mentally spending the money, and then they're like, no, they put it back on the market for whatever reason. Just that level of disappointment. That in and of itself is why I target back on the markets, because I know, just like personally knowing how that feels. And then you can probably multiply it by 10 for just, a seller that they're not in this business. So this is like, their first or second time even selling property. It really is like, it's such a bad situation for them. Even in the inspection aspect of it when it comes back on the market, but dealing with it as like a wholesale situation is, in my opinion, that's even worse. But if they don't, especially if you're not being transparent, like you're saying that you guys do, a lot of investors do not do that. They're not transparent, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then they're kind of like the sellers, like, well, I don't understand what happened, It's like, at least if you're clear. So if anybody's thinking about doing that, make sure that you're clear with those sellers about what's going on. And I tell you, like 9 times out of 10, it's fine. They understand. They know.
If they're motivated. They're motivated. So.
Yeah, they don't care who buys the house. They just need it sold.
Mm-hmm.
But saying it up front, like the intention is for us to buy this house, but for any reason that we need to reach out to somebody else, that's a possibility. And so that they do understand that could happen. Mm-hmm. It's not always, we try to know what the strategy is going into it ahead of time. If we are going to flip or if we are going to wholesale, we already know when we go out there what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. I think having that exit strategy planned out ahead of time sort of helps alleviate some of that too.
Yeah.
But well, this was awesome information. I thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights on MLS. It's given me some things to think about with the way we're approaching that, for sure.
Good. Well, I hope you get something locked up. I think it's fun on the MLS. I'm not so great, face-to-face with sellers just yet. So it's in my world, it's easier. I know everybody's different, but
could be a good one for those introverts that are listening.
Yeah, definitely.
Or you're not prepared to talk to sellers yet, but this is a way to get properties where you don't have to.
Yeah, well, you're still too afraid that you've spent all the money for marketing, and you're still too afraid to answer the phone when they call. Like, because I've been there. I know exactly how that is. But
we've all been there.
You don't have to talk to anybody except your agent does it for you. So
for sure. Awesome. Well, do you have a place where people can reach you online or?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, they can just shoot me an email at jill@jillbuyshouses.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. This was fun.
Yes, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and enjoy your week.
Oh, you too.